2016 has been a big year of change for superannuation. Here to tell us what 2017 holds is new ASFA Chief Executive Martin Fahey. Martin, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And Martin, what are your priorities for the new role? What would you like to see happen in the super industry over the next 12 months and beyond?
What I'd really like to see in the next 12 months is that superannuation becomes embedded in a fundamental part of what we would call the Australian narrative. All the great sort of public policy advances that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 decades have all been embedded in the narrative. If we think about free education or universal healthcare, it's about making superannuation part of that great Australian story and getting people to engage with it as a real part of their life on a day-to-day basis.
And obviously we've got the government's changes to super tax concessions coming into place on 1 July. How will you be working with members to help them through these changes?
So we'll be working at 2 levels. We're working very, very closely with ASFA members to engage and understand what are the regulatory implications in terms of how are these going to manifest themselves in terms of the middle office, the back office, how they're going to engage with super fund members, what are the implications for super fund members, and what are the intricacies and the messiness of the reality of rolling out what are very, very substantial changes, and whether that's how we implement the cap, how do we think members should be communicated with, the engagements and the interactions with the ATO. So as part of our discussion groups, as part of our policy groups, we're working with our members and with the ATO to understand what will be the key moments, what are the inflection points, how do we need to handle the challenges in changing systems and processes, etc.
And aside from issues with industry stakeholders, do you think there's any danger that the changes will erode consumer trust in the super system?
We're always concerned that people's level of engagement and trust in super is maintained at the high levels that we have already. It's clear from our research that Australians are very, very committed to superannuation as a mechanism for saving for retirement, and we don't want to see anything that's going to impede that or impinge on it. Having said that, what we have seen in the recent APRA quarterly data is that when there's uncertainty around the policy settings, it causes people to pause in their planning for their retirement, and they may make smaller contributions, they may decide to postpone investment decisions as part of their superannuation. So what we'd like to see is real clarity around the public policy settings for super. We'd like to think that these are the last changes that we'll see in the tax on super before the next election, but we'd also like to see longer term an alignment of policy considerations with the intergenerational report every 5 years. Let's give super some time to settle. Let's understand what are the consequences of the changes that we put through. How is super stream behaving? How's my super working out? What's happening in terms of the incentives and the nudging that we've done in the past? Is it actually working? All of this is essential to allowing consumers to understand superannuation, to engage with superannuation. And if we continue to tinker with the system, there is a real danger that people will become disengaged and think that it's all too hard. And that would be a tragedy for Australia. Super works. I think everybody would agree, it's a universally unqualified human good. It delivers great outcomes for Australians, not just for individuals, but for the economy as a whole. So let's agree we're not going to tinker with the system. Let's agree we're going to align to the intergenerational report and that we're all going to commit to what is a great Australian story.
And aside from the changes to tax concessions, what other regulatory issues will you be working with the government and with members on in 2017?
So if we look out across the calendar year 2017, we see a number of issues. We see RG 97, where fees and costs and the reporting of fees and costs. We've already worked with members both within ASFA and across the other associations. There's been really a united voice on this question of the timing of the implementation and when how the transition arrangements will work. And we were successful in getting that postponed to the end of September for members, and working very, very closely with ASIC on that. The other key issues are obviously insurance, where again we've been working with our peer bodies and our sister bodies across the industry to look at insurance and superannuation, and the task force is working away on 3 or 4 key streams of work. We're looking at how can we stop insurance premium eroding balances, how can we make the claims process work better, how can we avoid having people having duplicate policies when they don't need them, and how can we make sure that the level of confidence and the fees and the costs associated with insurance and super are delivering value to members. We've also got the bigger question of the objective of superannuation, and we're drafting a response to the government, which is due on New Year's Eve this year. And then I think the final one in the last week has been the comprehensive income products for retirement, so-called SIPPers, or what's going to be My Retirement, according to the discussion paper, really understanding and engaging with what the government's proposing and the options the government's putting up there. So a really full calendar from a policy point of view in 2017, but lots of things that we think can be used as an opportunity to strengthen super, make it more efficient, but also make it more effective in terms of delivering better outcomes for retirees.
Yes, obviously a lot going on. And over the time that you've been in the industry, how have you seen superannuation evolve?
I think what is really, I think, impressive about superannuation is not just the difference that it makes to individual retirees' life and this great accumulation of 2.2, 2.3 trillion that we've seen, but the role it plays in the economy more generally. So it's essential to providing deposits and bank deposits to underpin our financial system. It's a key part of infrastructure and infrastructure development. It supports the ASX and the companies in the ASX and stimulates innovation there. But it's also becoming, through the role of investment in real estate, investment in other assets, it's becoming an important fiscal stimulus. It's probably the only source of fiscal stimulus left, given the budgetary constraints that we have and the fiscal imperatives the government faces. So superannuation funds are genuinely out there engaging in nation-building type activities, whether it's critical infrastructure or whether it's hospitals or whether it's, you know, we see the new convention centre here in Sydney, really building out the infrastructure and the facilities in the economy at a time when it's badly needed.
And finally, how do you expect the super system of the future to look?
I think the super system of the future will be much more aligned to the way people's lives are changing. So if we think about young people in the system, they're going to want to be able to engage with their super on a continuous basis as they go from education into exploring and an extended teenage period that will run right to their 30s. And they have multiple jobs and they maybe participate in the gig economy. We need to align super to that, to the values that they hold about, you know, ESG investment, to their views on how much risk they want to take. So the system's going to have to respond to the demands of those people, those younger people, and how it engage. And that's going to be a real challenge. And we see some early movement in that area with, you know, things like Spaceship being announced and a chance to participate in high-tech stocks through your superannuation. At the other end, at the retiree stage, we're reaching that point where I think we're now acknowledging that there's going to be significant longevity risk. People are going to be living till their late 90s. And the question that we really have to address is, are we going to be younger for longer, or are we going to be older for longer? And being younger for longer is going to be much easier if you've got a comfortable retirement. It's a dignified retirement, that you're not relying on the age pension, that you've got vitality, you can afford to put on the air conditioning. And that really speaks to what do we think is an appropriate retirement standard. And so for us, as people go into retirement, the Ask for Retirement standard is going to be a big part of the message that we're getting out there. It's not just enough to have an adequate retirement that supplements the age pension. You need something that's going to give you a dignified, comfortable retirement. Because if it's dignified and comfortable, it's going to be much more enjoyable.
Great, Martin. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you.